In the past few years, an unusual trend has emerged. Young people developing sudden, severe tics seemingly out of nowhere. Doctors started noticing this uptick around 2020 and found a link to something surprising: social media. But it turns out that this mysterious tic pandemic is connected to an illness that has followed humans since the Middle Ages. In 1518, the modern-day French city of Strasbourg was a tough place to live. There was religious and political turmoil, mass poverty, primitive sanitation, diseases like smallpox and syphilis ran rampant. It's definitely not the France we know today. And on a hot summer day in July, a woman known only as Frau Trophia stepped onto the square of Strasbourg and began dancing. And never stopped. She danced uncontrollably for days until she collapsed from exhaustion, but then got up and started dancing again, unable to stop. Soon others joined her in her dancing. Even when authorities took Frau Trophia away, the others didn't stop dancing. City officials thought that the best way to stop the dancing plague was to tire them into submission by bringing in more dancers and musicians. But this only made the problem worse, with more people dancing uncontrollably. So they backtracked and decided to just ban music and dancing in the entire city. Because apparently music and dancing was gay and the work of the devil. That's the actual reason they gave. I don't know about you, but I don't consider this satanic.
I'm Renata Bliss, and I'm your freestyle dance teacher.
A shocker to no one, this ban didn't do anything. By August, hundreds were dancing in the streets and some were collapsing from exhaustion. But by September, the dancing mania had ended just as mysteriously as it started. The dancing plague of 1518 was one of many which spread across Europe from the 14th to the 17th centuries. And as the world industrialized, similar cases of mass hysteria were popping up across factories. Those infected were experiencing seizures and became extremely violent. And they started popping up in schools too. On January 30th in 1962, an all-girls boarding school in Kashasha, Tanzania became the center of another outbreak. 3 girls in the school started laughing uncontrollably for days.
I came over to see what was going on. Children started laughing. They're just laughing. It is a crazy laughing, jumping all over the place.
Within a couple of months, nearly 60% of students in the school were laughing uncontrollably. Because of this, the school was forced to close on March 18th. But that only made it worse. With the girls being sent home, the epidemic spread to the villages where the girls lived. Young villagers from surrounding districts became infected and had laughing attacks for weeks. Soon, all 14 schools in a 100-mile radius were forced to close. When the epidemic finally died off 18 months after it had started, around 1,000 people were affected. And other outbreaks continued well into the 21st century, mostly in schools, but also in subway stations and other public areas. The cause of these outbreaks is not what you're thinking. It's not food poisoning or some kind of viral contagion spreading. All of these outbreaks are examples of what's today called mass psychogenic illness, or MPI, a phenomenon where a large group of people all suddenly experience similar symptoms of an illness with no biological cause. You can think of MPI like a social virus, a contagious spread of illness across a specific population. And it's not just people faking it. Those infected are experiencing actual symptoms of the illness, usually things like headaches, dizziness, nausea, or pain. But sometimes it's more intense, like body convulsions and seizures, or socially unacceptable behavior like uncontrollable laughter or swearing. MPI happens from a combination of psychological, social, and environmental factors. When a large number of people are experiencing high levels of stress and anxiety, they're more prone to what's called the nocebo effect. Basically, it's the opposite of the placebo effect. With the placebo effect, patients experience improved outcomes just by believing that the medicine will help them. But if people expect to get sick or see others that are sick, they're more likely to exhibit those symptoms themselves because they're subconsciously mimicking the symptoms of those around them. If we look back at all the MPI cases, they're all happening in close-knit groups, in places like schools, factories, public squares, areas where members of the population share very strong social bonds with each other, constantly influencing each other's perceptions and reactions through conscious and subconscious social cues. And the only thing needed to start an outbreak in this high-stress, close-knit group is an environmental trigger, usually something that's ambiguous, like a strange smell, sound, or action. Often these triggers are coming from the first person infected, the index case. In many outbreaks, the index case is experiencing genuine symptoms from something that actually happened, and then others around them start subconsciously mimicking those real symptoms. This is what researchers found was happening with this rapid rise of tics among young people. Before 2020, referrals for tic-like behaviors as a primary problem made up only 1 to 2% of cases. But after 2020, that number shot up to 35%. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, millions of young people were experiencing very high levels of stress and were confined to spending more than 6 hours every day online, with their only form of social interaction being on social media, where they formed close-knit social bonds with others who were following similar content. One of the most popular types of content they were exposed to were TikTok and YouTube videos about Tourette's syndrome, a neurological disorder that often involves repetitive tics and inappropriate social behavior. Teenagers were spending so many hours day after day consuming content about Tourette's syndrome that their brains subconsciously started to mimic the symptoms. They developed functional tic-like behaviors that researchers now call mass social media induced illness, or MSMI. After some investigation of the teenagers' social media feed, researchers found the virtual index case of this outbreak, Jan Zimmerman, a German YouTuber who posted videos educating people about life with Tourette's. Not only was it revealed that most of the young people infected were watching Zimmerman's videos, but even their tics mirrored the specific movements of Zimmerman. So by trying to educate people about Tourette's, Zimmerman unintentionally ended up becoming the environmental trigger of a tic pandemic. And it was a pandemic. Unlike the dancing or laughing epidemics, which stayed in a large but specific area, MSMI was recorded across multiple countries. And that's because of the nature of how social media algorithms work. While people before were more closely knit with those who were in the same physical location as them, young people today form closer social bonds with those who consume the same content they do, even if that person is across the planet. Essentially today, social media is the new public square. There is good news though. The researchers found that when an infected person is told that they're infected with MSMI, their symptoms are more likely to disappear. And they found the obvious solution. When most of the teenagers stopped watching videos about Tourette's, their tics stopped. But for some, it took more serious treatment, things like therapy and medication. And while the number of young people reporting tic-like symptoms is still high, at least now we know that the main driving force behind this pandemic was social media. These social media apps, some of which aren't even a decade old, were able to create a pandemic within a pandemic. This social media-induced illness shows that we've entered a completely new stage of health, where our online experiences are starting to affect our physical health. But just how much is still a mystery. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more videos about how technology is affecting our lives, check out my recent episode where I examine whether smart guns are the solution to America's gun crisis. Or subscribe to make more videos like this possible. I'll see you in the next one.